lot has changed since the 1980s. This location right here used to be the Pasadena Plaza. It was a happening mall a long time ago when I was a kid. That and the Glendale Galleria. And it looks totally different. I'm on at large today. I'm in Pasadena, California. We're going to talk about a very brutal murder that occurred many years ago of Lois Haro. Without further ado, let's get moving. October 18th, 1988. In a neighborhood not very far from here. It's about a little after 6 p.m. and 26-year-old Lois Haro, she's at home and she's getting ready to cook dinner. And as she's getting everything ready, she says, "Oh man, I forgot. There's a baby shower coming up and she has yet to get a gift for the expected parents." So she grabs her purse, a piece of paper and a pen, and leaves a note for her husband saying that she's gonna come down to the mall where I'm at right now to get something for the baby shower. She sticks the note on the refrigerator and she jumps into her little blue Toyota and she starts heading down towards this mall. After she finds a parking space, Lois gets out of her vehicle and she goes right up this escalator right where I'm walking up right now. Now in 1988, when you would reach the top of this, there would be a JCPenney straight ahead, and that was her target. It is no longer there. It's been knocked down many years ago. It looks totally different. This is not even the same place anymore, but she would have walked over there. She would have went shopping. She grabs something. She turns around. Maybe she looks and takes a peek and a look at the different stores here at the mall. And she would proceed to go back down this escalator to her car. We're gonna fast forward about an hour later. It's just after 9 o'clock and two Pasadena police officers, they're driving down this very street right here. Probably doing about 30 miles an hour. So as they cross this street right here, they see over in the median about 8 feet from the curb, they see somebody crumpled down in a heap. They immediately stop the patrol car and get out, and they see a woman. She's wearing a beige jumpsuit with flowers on it. And they go up to her and they see that she's bleeding from her ears and she's bleeding from her nose. There's also a wound coming from her head. The cop starts shaking her, "Hey, are you okay? Are you okay?" She does not respond. He puts his ear down to her mouth to see if he can hear anything, and he's surprised to hear a gasp come from her. Immediately, he tells his partner to radio for an ambulance to get over here pronto. Now, the ambulance would show up in less than 5 minutes, and they begin to render aid to this woman. And as soon as they put her on the stretcher and they get her into the paramedic unit, all of a sudden she stops breathing. And they begin CPR. And while one paramedic is doing CPR, the other is shoving an IT tube down her throat into her esophagus to get some air into her lungs. And they would drive a few miles to the hospital, frantically doing chest compressions and bagging her to make sure that she could make it to the hospital until they can get her into the emergency room. But this is where she was picked up at. She sadly did not make it. She would be dead within about 15 or 20 minutes of reaching the hospital. There once was a memorial in this area that once had grass that was left in her memory, long since gone, those rocks. But it was somewhere out here under this very, very, very well-known and notorious bridge. Little do people know that under this notorious bridge occurred a notorious murder. Within about 30 minutes of her death, homicide detectives are already at the hospital going over things, asking the police officers that originally found her exactly what they seen and just telling them everything that they know. So this lady did not have a purse on her, no identification. So it would be some time before the identity of this woman was in fact Lois Harrow. So now the detectives have the sad responsibility of telling the family, I hate to inform you, but your loved one has been found and they're dead. Who could do this? Who could do this to someone that was so loved and so well supported? At the time of her murder, Lois was working at a place that sold seismographic instruments, and she was going to Cal State LA because she wanted to get her degree in anthropology. And all of that was taken away from her by the disgusting acts of some individuals. So they're going over everything. Did she have any enemies? What would she do when she get off of work? They're just asking the family a bunch of questions, and they are at a loss of words. They don't know who could have done this. And so you have one dead 26-year-old Lois Harrow. And however, her car is nowhere to be found. We're looking for a small 1983 blue Toyota Tercel. And so the following day, during the briefing that usually police departments go through when they just kind of talk about the crimes that occurred within the week and what they're looking for, they put a BOLO, be on the lookout for that car, that little blue 1983 Toyota Tercel. And right after that initial morning, it would only be but a few hours when someone spots that very car, someone's driving it. So that very morning, a police assistant, he's driving one of those white unmarked vehicles that sometimes you see. You might wonder to yourself, who is that guy? It'll have like city vehicle plates on it. Usually they're assistants that work for the sheriff's department or they work for the police. They're kind of like the eyes and ears, and they just drive around looking for whatever issues might pop up. So this police assistant, he's driving down this street right here, Pepper. And he's going down this way, and a little blue Toyota Tercel is going the opposite way. And he immediately stops, makes a U-turn, and comes back up to the street. He sees the Toyota pull into some apartments. Now, I don't know if it's exactly these apartments. I'm on Pepper, I don't know. But he sees the Toyota pull into these apartments. So he jumps out of his vehicle and he hides behind a wall, and he's kind of just like looking at the guy, seeing who it is. And he sees the Toyota park in the parking lot. He sees a black dude jump out, goes to the trunk, and he's standing at the trunk. So he's watching him from his back. He doesn't really know what he's doing. So he's fumbling around in his hand something, and he opens the trunk. He's fumbling with something again. He shuts the trunk and he turns around and he goes into his apartment. Well, the license plate on the vehicle, well, now it's gone. So immediately he gets on his radio and he calls the station and says, hey, get a couple guys over here. I think I see the car that the lady that was murdered, who it might be. So two detectives, they come back up here and they go to the apartment where the police assistant said he disappeared into. So they knock on the door, and this guy opens the door. Black dude, kind of young, looks like he's in his 20s. So they ask him, well, hey, who are you? What's your name? And he identifies himself as Ronald Jones. And they said, okay, Ronald, how old are you? And he says, I'm 19. And he goes, all right, hey, can you come outside? We want to talk to you. We're investigating a murder that took place the other night. He goes outside with the detectives and he says, before we do anything, I'm going to pat you down. So they start patting this Ronald Jones guy down. And one of the cops, he feels like an object in his pocket. And he says, what's that? And Ronald says, those are the keys to my Audi. And he's like, all right. And he goes to his other pocket and he feels a similar object. And he's saying, okay, well, what's that? He said, those are keys. So the detective, he grabs the keys from his pocket, he pulls them out, and he sees a big key with a Toyota emblem on it. So he walks over to the blue Tercel, he takes the key, and voila, it opens. Wow, amazing. And so the detective turns to him and he says, can you tell me how you got this car? And he says, well, it's my friend's, he bought it. And they said, okay, your friend bought this car. He's like, yeah. He told me he bought it from some woman for about $800. And they're like, okay. So as they turn around to go back into the apartment, the detectives, now they don't have a search warrant at this time, so they're just kind of looking. So the detective notices that there's a couple debit cards in the trash can by the kitchen. And guess whose name is on those cards? Lois Harrow, yes, Lois Harrow. And he asks Ronald, he says, can you tell me where you got these cards from? He says, man, I don't know. Oh, okay. All right, so they immediately place him in handcuffs and they take him down to the station. When they get to the station, they take his booking photo and they take the cuffs off and they ask him, all right, empty your pockets. Now, this dude all of a sudden starts kind of moving kind of like funny or gyrating his body. He's doing some kind of nonsense. And the detectives, you know, they've seen this move before. That's when you have something on you that you don't want them to know that you have. So they just tell him, take everything out of your pocket now. So he starts taking everything out. And what do we have? More cards, bank cards, debit cards, credit cards with Lois Harrow's name on it. And they're like, okay, we need to talk. We need to know how you got these cards, and we want to know why you have a woman who's just been murdered. We want to know why you have possession of her vehicle, and we want the truth, and we want it now. As the police are questioning Ronald, the autopsy report finally comes back, and Lois's cause of death was a gunshot wound that entered the top of her skull and traveled to the base. And there was also numerous small bruises on her inner thighs, knees, and both legs, and with small scratches on her right side. Can you imagine? Can you imagine you're the husband of this woman who's been brutally murdered and a detective has to ask you, did you recently have sex with your wife? Because that's when they need to know whether a rape has been committed. And later on, they would find out that indeed it had been committed. So they take Ronald down to the station and they said, listen, we're investigating the murder of Lois Harrow. You had her car. You want to talk to us? And he says, well, I'll talk to y'all, but I didn't do anything. And they said, okay, where were you last night at around 8 p.m.? And he says, I was with my girlfriend. And they said, then what? And they said, well, I went to my girlfriend's house. We hung out for a while. After that, I went to my cousin's. And then after that, I went to Brenner Park to meet my friend George, which is where we're at. This is Brenner Park. So Ronald supposedly would have came over to this very park to meet up with his friend George. Now they're asking him, who's your friend? And they're starting to slowly break Ronald down. And they're asking him 2 questions at a time. They ask him, were you at the Plaza Mall last night? And he said, yeah, I was there earlier. And they said, okay, listen, we're not stupid. We know what's going on here. You need to talk to us. So Ronald then gives his first confession. He says that he was at the mall, and in fact, it wasn't necessarily this park where he first met up with George that night. He actually met up with him at this park, but earlier in the afternoon, and then they went to the mall. So he basically tells the detectives that him and George went to the mall and they were looking for somebody to rob, and that they spotted Lois, and she looked like an easy mark because she had like, first of all, she was very small, and she had jewelry on, and that's the reason why they targeted her. So they grab her as she's getting into her car, and they force her into the vehicle in the back seat. So Ronald says that he's driving, and then that Lois is in the back seat with George. And as they're driving, they hop on the 210 freeway, and they're figuring out what to do. So they ask her that they want all her money. Now in her purse, she doesn't have very much cash. She maybe has about $17 to $18. So and this is according to Ronald, as he's driving, George forces Lois in the back to perform oral sex on him. And then after he's done, he tells her to lay down, and he proceeds to have sex with her. Those are his words. So he says, well, what happened next? And he says, well, we drove to where the bridge was, where her body would be found. And he tells her to get out of the vehicle. She gets out of the vehicle, and he says, no, you stupid whatever. I think he called her the B word. And according to Ronald, George pulls out the gun and shoots her. And then they jump in the vehicle and they get out. Okay, so in theory, now we have the suspect of this crime. And then one of the detectives, he asks Ronald, he says, did you have sex with her too? And he says, at first, no. And then they press him again. They said, now is the time to be honest. This is a very serious matter. And right now, you could be possibly looking at the death penalty. And he asked him again, did you have sex with her? And he says, well, just a little bit. Just a little bit. Oh, just a little bit, just a little bit. So after they're done talking to him, they place him in jail and charge him with the murder and kidnap of Lois Harrell. Now, we have another problem. We're looking for George Trone, and we don't know where he's at. So they start asking around their different friends in the area. George's girlfriend at the time had told the police that on that night of her murder that George had some jewelry on him and that he wanted to give to her. However, she didn't take it because it didn't fit her. And she doesn't know where he got it from. He told her that he bought it off this lady. So eventually they contacted another friend who said that that night, or like very late at night, early in the morning, George had given him a gun to hold. And then he would come back about 4 hours later and pick that gun back up. And he says, like, what are you gonna do with the gun? Because he's saying that he needs to get rid of it. He says, I'm just gonna ditch it in the mountains, in the San Gabriel Mountains or somewhere. And so they said, okay, where can we find George Trone? And they said, well, he always hangs out at this park. So the police are constantly driving up and down the street looking for George, and around 10 p.m. That evening, 11 o'clock, they see him here, and they quickly apprehended him and placed him under arrest. They would take him down to the same interrogation room that they had Ronald, but when they started talking to him, he had pretty much the same exact story that Ronald had, except that the roles were reversed. You could pretty much rewind the video and play it word for word what I just said during the interrogation of Ronald Jones. And that's exactly what George Trone said. But the roles would be reversed. The roles would be that George Trone wasn't the one that actually pulled the trigger. It was Ronald Jones. So eventually, detectives, they got enough from both of these raping losers, and they would put them both on trial. It would be, from what I remember, separate trials. And eventually, during the trial of Ronald Jones, he actually testifies on his own behalf. Now, anybody in that situation, when you're being charged with a heinous, vicious crime and they're seeking the death penalty, hell, you might as well get on the stand. You might save your own life. When the prosecutor was questioning Jones about what he did after the murder, he said that after he shot and killed Lois, that he went home, he made himself a hamburger, and he watched The Honeymooners on Nick at Night. That's what he thought about that woman's life. Oh well, let me just watch an old TV show, and that'll make me feel better. Maybe that'll make me forget the horrible person, the absolute horrible person that I am. So both trials end, and they're both found guilty. George Trone was sentenced to life in prison. He is never, ever, ever getting out. And Ronald Jones, he's sentenced to die in California's gas chamber at the time. However, there is no more gas chamber. We don't have the gas chamber anymore here. So now, both these guys, they're just sitting in prison. They're still there. They're still there, and they're never, ever, ever getting out. It's been as the recording of this video, it's been about, I want to say, 38 years since this murder occurred. And they murdered this poor woman. For what? $18 in her purse, some of her jewelry, and a car. Rest in peace to this woman, and condolences to her family. A terrible, terrible crime. All right, guys, I'm out of here. Many more stories to come. I'll see you on the next vlog. Peace out.